Hey guys, tonight we are going to unravel the story woven into one of the most beautiful and complex objects ever created by human hands, the Persian carpet. Imagine for a moment the feel of one beneath your bare feet, the dense, soft pile giving way just slightly, a landscape of color and texture that feels ancient and alive all at once. Now, imagine creating that, not with a computer or a factory, but with nothing more than your hands, some dyed wool, and an almost unbelievable amount of patience. You're about to be dropped into a world so far removed from your own that, let's be honest, you probably wouldn't survive the first winter. No central heating, no grocery delivery, just you, a herd of sheep, and a horizon that doesn't care if you see it tomorrow. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And for a bit of fun, post your location and what time it is where you are. It's always fascinating to see where everyone is listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your journey doesn't begin in a grand palace or a bustling city bazaar. It starts much higher and much colder. Feel the air thin in your lungs, the wind a constant, biting presence against your skin. You are standing on the vast, rugged expanse of the Iranian plateau, perhaps somewhere in the Zagros Mountains. The landscape around you is a study in powerful monotones, the ochre of dry earth, the slate gray of rock, the pale, washed-out green of hardy, scrubby plants that cling to life with a stubbornness you have to respect. In the distance, the peaks of mountains are jagged against a sky so blue it almost hurts to look at. This is a place of harsh beauty, of stark realities. Survival here is not a given. It's a daily negotiation with the elements. You are part of a people on the move. Your family, your clan, has followed the same migratory paths for generations, leading your flocks of sheep and goats from the high pastures of summer to the sheltered valleys of winter. Your home is not a single place, but a rhythm. You watch your mother and your grandmother as they work. Their hands, though chapped and calloused, move with a fluid grace that seems almost unconscious. They are sitting before a simple, horizontal loom staked to the ground. It's a primitive-looking thing, just two wooden beams with a web of taut vertical threads stretched between them. This is the skeleton of the world they are creating. To your modern eyes, it might look like a tedious chore, but here, it's a form of communion. It's a library of stories being told in a language of knots. They laugh and talk, their voices a low murmur against the ever-present wind. They are not just weaving a rug, they are weaving their lives into it. It's the rhythm of the seasons, the bleating of the flock, the creak of the leather straps on the pack animals. Your permanent address is the path itself. And in this life of constant motion, everything you own must be essential, durable, and, if at all possible, portable. Your tent, made of dark, heavy goat hair, is a fortress against the wind. Your cooking pots are blackened from 1,000 fires. And your floor is a miracle. It's a burst of impossible color and softness, laid directly upon the hard, unforgiving ground. It is your garden in the wilderness, your map of the cosmos, your shield against the cold that seeps up from the earth. This tradition is older than the histories written by kings. Long before Darius the Great etched his triumphs into the rock at Behistun for all the Achaemenid Empire to see, your ancestors were tying knots. This is a mainstream historical fact that's easy to forget. The Persian Empire, one of the most powerful states of the ancient world, was built on a foundation of these nomadic and semi-nomadic cultures. The great kings and their stone palaces at Persepolis relied on the wool, the meat, and the fierce warriors that came from these very highlands. You, in your simple tent, are part of the engine that drives an empire, even if you never see its gilded capital. You crouch down, the smoke from the central fire stinging your eyes just a little. Let's take a closer look at the source of it all, The sheep. These aren't the fluffy, perfectly white sheep of nursery rhymes. These are fat-tailed sheep, a hardy, ancient breed perfectly adapted to this environment. As a quirky little tidbit, their large tails are not just for show. They are a massive deposit of fat, a vital energy reserve for surviving lean times. That fat is also a crucial resource for your family, rendered down for cooking, for fuel for lamps, and even as a base for primitive ointments. So the animal that provides the very fiber for your art also lights your tent and fills your belly. The sheep, in a very real sense, is life. Its wool is thick, oily with lanolin that makes it naturally water-resistant and surprisingly strong. It's a far cry from the delicate merino we know today, but it is exactly what is needed to create a textile that can withstand being trampled by feet, packed onto a camel, and slept on for decades. The very concept of a floor covering is something we take for granted. But historians still argue whether the first pile carpets were primarily for warmth or for ritualistic purposes. Were they simply a practical solution to a cold floor, a kind of portable insulation? Or did they begin as sacred spaces, designated areas for prayer, for honoring guests, for creating a patch of consecrated ground no matter where you pitched your tent? Looking at the care and artistry already evident in these early weavings, it's hard to believe they were only practical. There is an intention here, a desire to create beauty in a place where beauty is scarce. It suggests a deep human need to not just survive the world, but to shape it, to create a space that reflects an inner, more orderly, and more vibrant reality. There's no Wi-Fi here, no streaming services, no distractions. There is only the land, the sky, the flock, and the slow, deliberate creation of a masterpiece, not by patient knot. That slow, deliberate creation of a masterpiece, not by patient knot, existed in a world without written records for its craft. For millennia, the idea of a truly ancient, complex Persian-style carpet was just a ghost, a theory based on mentions in Greek texts and depictions in stone reliefs. Grave robbers, it seems, is one of the world's oldest professions, right up there with tax collector and complaining about the weather. The tattooed body of the chieftain, his skin still bearing intricate designs of swirling beasts. Horses saddled and bridled for the afterlife. Wall hangings made of felt, delicate silks from faraway China, and a disassembled four-wheeled chariot. And then, as they melt one particularly large, lumpy block, something incredible unfurls. It is a carpet. Not just a fragment, not a few threads, but a nearly complete pile carpet, its colors muted, but still astonishingly present. This is the Pazyryk carpet, the oldest one ever discovered, and it fundamentally rewrote the history of the art form. Finding this was like finding a fully functional smartphone in a sealed Egyptian tomb. It wasn't supposed to exist. But this one is different. As your team digs deeper into the mound, you breach the central wooden burial chamber and find ice, a solid, impenetrable block of it. The tomb had, at some point long ago, been flooded with water, which then froze solid and never fully thawed, creating a natural time capsule. The looters, having stolen the gold and precious metals, had missed the real treasure, believing everything else to be rotted away. But locked in the ice, preserved in a way no museum curator could have dreamed, was an entire world. It was assumed that any such fragile organic object would have long ago returned to dust. And it would have, if not for a freak accident of nature, a moment of perfect preservation in a place you'd least expect. To find it, you have to leave the high plains of Persia and travel north, further north into the chill, thin air of the Altai Mountains in what is now Siberia. The year is 1949. You are with a team of Soviet archaeologists led by a man named Sergei Rudenko. You're excavating a Kurgan-Scythian burial mound. These mounds, dotting the landscape like sleeping green giants, are the tombs of nomadic chieftains and nobles from the Iron Age. Most of the time, these tombs have been looted in antiquity. The team works carefully, using hot water to painstakingly melt their way through the centuries. And as the ice recedes, impossible things emerge. You kneel beside it, the chill of the melting ice seeping into your knees. You can't believe what you're seeing. The carpet is roughly 6 feet by 6 feet, a near-perfect square. 2,500 years ago. The weaving is dense, with a high knot count that speaks to a mature and established tradition. And here lies the central mystery. Archaeologists and art historians still argue whether the Pazyryk carpet was a masterpiece of the local Pazyryk people, a branch of the Scythians, or if it was a trade, good a diplomatic gift, or perhaps even loot acquired from the Achaemenid Persian Empire to the south. The technique, the use of the symmetrical Turkish knot, and the sheer quality points towards the established workshops of Persia. Yet the subject matter, the deer, and the specific style of horsemanship, feels local. It's a beautiful puzzle, an object that sits at a crossroads of cultures. The central field is a grid of 24 squares, each containing a star or flower-like design. It's geometric, orderly, and calming. But it's the borders that take your breath away. There are 5 of them, each a frame telling a different story. One border shows a procession of griffins, their eagle heads and lion bodies, a clear link to the mythology of the ancient Near East. Another shows a line of fallow deer, grazing peacefully. And then there is the most magnificent border of all, a parade of 28 horses, each with a rider or a groom walking beside it. The detail is staggering. The men have beards and characteristic Scythian haircuts. The horses' tails are tied in a specific knot, their saddles and bridles decorated with felt appliques. This wasn't the work of a beginner. This was the work of a master. This single frozen artifact, dated to the 5th century BCE, proved that the art of the pile carpet was already at a peak of technical and artistic sophistication. The mainstream historical fact here is its age and provenance, a 5th century BCE Scythian burial artifact. But the tomb held other secrets that give us a window into the daily, or perhaps not so daily, life of these people. A quirky tidbit that the Greek historian Herodotus had written about centuries earlier was that the Scythians had a ritual of purifying themselves in a small tent filled with the smoke of burning hemp seeds, which made them howl with pleasure. It sounded like a fanciful tale until Redenko's team unearthed, in another nearby tomb, a small tripod-like structure, a bronze brazier, and a leather pouch full of cannabis seeds. They found the entire kit, the world's first ever documented hotbox session, it seems. But back to our frozen marvel. The Pazyryk carpet is more than just an artifact. It's a bridge. It connects the world of your imagination, that smoky nomadic tent in the Zagros Mountains, with a tangible reality. It proves that the artistry we associate with later Persian carpets wasn't a recent development, but the continuation of a deep, ancient river of creativity. It tells us that for thousands of years, people have been pouring their stories, their beliefs, and their sense of order into these woven worlds. Looking at the Pazyryk carpet, you have to wonder about the journey of its materials. Where did the wool come from? Who spun the yarn? How did they create those reds and yellows that could survive 2.5 millennia in a block of ice? The story of the carpet begins long before the first knot is tied. It begins with the flock. The story of the carpet begins long before the first knot is tied. It begins with the flock. So let's return to that high, windswept plateau, the bleating of the sheep a constant, gentle chorus in the background. Imagine yourself holding a struggling sheep between your knees, using a pair of primitive iron shears that look more like large, clumsy scissors. The work is hot, your back aches, and the air is thick with the greasy smell of lanolin and the dust of the flock. One of the many mainstream historical facts about this process is that the quality of the wool varies dramatically depending on which part of the sheep's body it comes from. The finest, softest wool, prized for its ability to hold dye and its gentle feel, comes from the sheep's shoulders and flanks. This is the A-list wool, reserved for the most delicate parts of a design or for a rug destined for someone important. The wool from the legs and belly is coarser, tougher, and more durable. It's perfect for the warp and weft the foundation threads that will take most of the strain. Nothing is wasted. The Persian carpet was a finished product, a silent testament. You carry the heavy, greasy bundle to a nearby stream. The water is cold enough to make your fingers ache, but it's essential for the first washing. You beat the fleece against the rocks, scrubbing it to remove the worst of the dirt, twigs, and what we'll politely call organic matter. A sheep's life is not a clean one. Then comes the carding and combing. You take the washed, dried clumps of wool and draw them between two flat, wire-bristled paddles. This process, called carding, teases the tangled fibers apart, aligning them into a soft, fluffy cloud called a roving. It's a repetitive, almost meditative task, but it's crucial for creating a smooth, even yarn. You could sit for hours, talking with the other women of your tribe, your hands moving automatically, transforming chaos into order. But you are here, now at the very beginning of the process, and it is anything but silent. It's a messy, noisy, and deeply physical world. The journey from a living, breathing animal to a shimmering thread of silk or a strong, resilient strand of wool is a testament to human ingenuity and a whole lot of hard work. First, there is the shearing. Forget the electric clippers and neat shearing sheds of today. Once the fleece is sheared off in a single matted piece, the real labor begins. Now for the spinning. You take a puff of that carded wool and attach it to a drop spindle. This is an ancient tool, a simple weighted stick that hangs from the thread. Silk, of course, does not come from a sheep. Its story is one of long-distance trade and closely guarded secrets. For centuries, the production of silk was a monopoly of China, a secret so valuable that its theft was punishable by death. The Silk Road, that legendary network of trade routes, wasn't just a path for finished fabrics. It was a conduit for culture, religion, and technology. And eventually, the secret got out. A quirky, and likely apocryphal, tidbit tells the story of how silk production came to the West. A Chinese princess, betrothed to a king in Central Asia, supposedly smuggled silkworm eggs and mulberry seeds out of China by hiding them in her elaborate hairstyle. A less romantic, but more historically plausible, account suggests that two Nestorian monks smuggled the precious eggs out in hollow bamboo canes around 550 CE, presenting them to the Byzantine Emperor Justinian. You give it a sharp twist, and as it spins, it pulls the fibers from the roving, twisting them together into a continuous strand of yarn. Your fingers act as the guide, controlling the thickness and tightness of the twist. Too loose, and the yarn will be weak. Too tight, and it will be brittle. It takes years of practice to develop the muscle memory needed to produce a consistent yarn. You can do it while walking, while watching the children, while stirring the cooking pot. It's the original form of multitasking. Spinning wasn't just a chore. It was a constant, low-level hum of productivity that filled every spare moment of a woman's day. While wool is the soul of the Persian carpet, silk is its shimmering, ethereal spirit. Regardless of how the secret escaped, Persia eventually became a major center for sericulture, the cultivation of silkworms. You walk into a special, climate-controlled room. The air is warm and still, filled with the rustling, munching sound of thousands of silkworms devouring mountains of fresh mulberry leaves. Wool was the fabric of the people, the material of nomadic life, strong and warm. Silk was the fiber of kings, a symbol of ultimate luxury, wealth, and connection to the divine. It catches the light in a way wool never can, giving a carpet an almost magical luminescence. A silk-on-silk carpet, with a silk foundation and silk pile, is an object of breathtaking opulence, so fine and fluid it can feel like heavy fabric. But a wool carpet with silk highlights is perhaps even more interesting. The weaver uses the silk selectively, perhaps to outline a flower petal or to give a mythical beast a glittering eye. It's a strategic use of luxury, a way of making the design literally shine. The choice between them wasn't just practical. It was a statement. It defined the rug's purpose, its intended owner, and its place in the world. From the floor of a humble tent to the throne room of a shah. And all of this work, the shearing, washing, carding, spinning, and reeling happens before a single thread is even dyed. They are voracious, fussy eaters. It's a full-time job just keeping them fed. After molting several times, the worm spins its cocoon, a single, continuous strand of silk filament that can be up to a mile long. To harvest it, the cocoons are boiled or steamed to kill the pupa inside, a slightly grim but necessary step to prevent the moth from breaking the precious filament when it emerges. Then the delicate work of unwinding the cocoon begins. Several filaments are reeled together to create a single thread of raw silk, which is then twisted or thrown to create a yarn strong enough for weaving. Historians still argue whether the most legendary Persian carpets, the ones described in epic poems and historical chronicles, are primarily wool or silk. All of this work, the shearing, washing, carding, spinning, and reeling, happens before a single thread is even dyed. That carefully prepared yarn, whether humble wool or shimmering silk, is still just a blank canvas, a pale ecru or creamy white. It holds potential, but no story. Before it can become part of a paradise garden or a mythical hunt, it must be given color. And to get that color, it must be brought to the loom. But first, let's talk about the loom itself. It's an instrument that seems simple on the surface, but is profound in its function. It is the architecture, the skeleton, the silent partner, and the dance of weaving. You're standing now in a dedicated workshop, perhaps in a bustling city like Isfahan or Tabriz, a world away from the nomadic camp. The air here doesn't smell of lanolin and campfire smoke. It smells of dust motes dancing in sunbeams, of tea, and of the faint, earthy scent of dyed wool. Instead of a simple horizontal loom staked to the ground, you see a massive vertical structure. It's a city loom, a professional weaver's loom, and it towers over you, reaching from floor to ceiling. Two thick, upright wooden beams form the sides. At the top and bottom are two more horizontal beams, the warp beams. Stretched between them, under incredible tension, are the vertical threads, the warp. These threads are the soul of the carpet structure. They must be strong, unyielding, and perfectly spaced. They are the silent grid upon which the entire universe of the carpet will be built. Feel the tension in those threads. You can pluck one like a harp string, and it emits a low, resonant thrum. This tension is crucial. It's what keeps the carpet straight and true. If the tension is uneven, the finished rug will buckle or curl. A weaver spends a great deal of time just dressing the loom, wrapping this continuous warp thread around the beams in a process that is both mechanically precise and physically demanding. This is the foundation, and any flaw here will be magnified 100-fold by the time the carpet is finished. It's a lesson in the importance of preparation, a proverb made of wood and string. No beautiful surface can last without a strong, hidden structure. Once the warp is set, the weaving can begin. The weaver starts at the bottom, creating a flat-woven edge called a killum. There is the soft thump, thump, thump of the weaver's fingers tying the knots, a sound too quiet to hear from afar. But punctuating this is the sharp, heavy thwack of the beater, compacting the weft. Thwack, thwack, thwack. It's the heartbeat of the loom. That sound, repeated thousands upon thousands of times, is the sound of the carpet growing, row by painstaking row. It's the sound of disparate threads being forged into a single, unified textile. The mainstream historical fact here is that the design of the vertical loom has remained virtually unchanged for centuries. A weaver from the 16th century Safavid court could walk into a workshop today and, aside from maybe better lighting and a thermos of tea, would know exactly what to do. The technology was perfected early on and has seen little need for improvement. This is a simple over-under weave of the horizontal threads, the weft, to secure the end of the rug and prevent the pile knots from unraveling. Think of it as the protective plastic cap on the end of a shoelace. After a few inches of this dense, flat weave, the real artistry starts, the tying of the knots. But for the carpet to have structure, each row of knots must be locked into place. This is where the weft threads come in. After a full row of knots is tied around the warp threads, the weaver passes one or more strands of weft thread through the warp, pushing it down tightly against the knots with a heavy, comb-like tool. This tool, often made of metal or dense wood, is called a cardic or beater. The sound of the workshop is a unique symphony. It's not the roar of machines, but a rhythmic, organic percussion. Of course, not all looms are giant city looms. Back in the nomadic tent, your loom is horizontal. It's made of two beams staked directly into the ground. It's a field of tension, a musical instrument, and a frame for creation. It dictates the rhythm of the work, and in many ways, the final character of the rug. It's the rigid, masculine principle of the warp, the unmoving structure, that provides the foundation for the soft, feminine principle of the weft and the pile, the elements that carry the color and the story. The loom is where the abstract idea of a design begins to take on physical form, where the soulless threads of spun wool and silk are gathered together, waiting for the final transformative step that will give them life, the magic of the dye pots. It's portable, easily disassembled, and packed onto a camel for the next leg of the journey. This type of loom presents its own challenges. Maintaining consistent tension is much harder, which is one reason why tribal rugs often have a more rustic, less geometrically perfect shape. They might be wider at one end than the other, or have wavy sides. These aren't flaws. They are the honest results of a life lived on the move. They are the signature of the loom itself. Historians still argue whether the horizontal or vertical loom came first. Logic suggests the simpler, portable horizontal loom is the ancestor, but evidence is scarce, as the wooden looms themselves rarely survive. For a quirky tidbit about the tools of the trade, let's look at the weaver's knife. To tie the knots quickly, a weaver uses a special knife, often with a small hook on the end, to loop the yarn around the warp, pull it tight, and then slice it off in a single fluid motion. A master weaver's hands move in a blur, a dance of fingers and blade. Over time, these knives become extensions of the weaver's hand, customized and cared for. Some antique weaving knives are beautiful objects in their own right, with handles made of bone, horn, or ornately carved wood. They are personal tools, imbued with the spirit of their owner and the memory of millions of knots tied. It's a far more intimate relationship than most of us have with our keyboards. The loom, then, is more than a machine. The magic of the dye pots. Before the loom can sing its rhythmic song, the carefully spun yarns must be bathed in color. You leave the dusty workshop and step into the dyer's quarter, an area of the city that announces itself long before you see it. The air is thick with a strange, complex smell, part earthy, part chemical, part floral, with the sharp tang of vinegar and the ammonia-like scent of stale urine. Huge cauldrons bubble over open fires, tended by men with arms stained in a rainbow, of hues up to their elbows. Skeins of wool hang from every rafter and clothesline, dripping vibrant reds, blues, and yellows onto the stone-paved ground, creating abstract paintings that are washed away with the next rainfall. This is not just a craft. It is alchemy. The dyer's art is one of secrets, of recipes passed down from master to apprentice, often within the same family for generations. The goal is not just to create a beautiful color, but to create a color that lasts, a color that resists fading from the sun and bleeding when washed. This quality is called color fastness, and achieving it is a multi-step process that relies on a deep, intuitive understanding of chemistry. A first and most crucial step is mordanting. Before the yarn is ever introduced to the dye, it must be soaked in a special substance called a mordant, which acts as a bonding agent, helping the dye molecules cling securely to the wool or silk fibers. The most common mordants in the ancient world were metal salts, primarily alum, potassium aluminum sulfate, which was often mined from the earth. Tin, copper, and iron were also used. The mainstream historical fact is that the choice of mordant would not only fix the dye, but could also dramatically alter the final color. The same dye bath could produce a brilliant scarlet with one mordant, and a deep maroon with another. Let's start with the king of colors, red. Red is the color of life, of passion, of power. The most sought-after red in the world of Persian carpets comes from the root of the madder plant. You watch as a dyer takes dried, pulverized madder roots and adds them to a cauldron of simmering water. The color that leaches out is a murky, uninspiring brownish orange, not exactly impressive. But then, the alum-mordanted skeins of wool are submerged in the bath. Slowly, almost magically, the wool begins to drink in the color, transforming into a range of reds, from a soft, rosy pink to a deep, vibrant crimson, depending on the concentration, temperature, and pH of the dye bath. It's a process that requires immense patience and a master's eye. A few degrees too hot, and the color will be dull. A few minutes too long, and the shade will be wrong. But madder wasn't the only source of red. For a truly luxurious, almost incandescent crimson, dyers turned to an insect, the cochineal. This tiny scale insect lives on prickly pear cacti. The dried bodies of the females are crushed to produce carminic acid, which creates a spectacular and very expensive red dye. This was the legendary crimson of the Aztecs and Incas, and after the Spanish conquest of the Americas, cochineal became one of the most valuable commodities in the world, its source a closely guarded secret. So when you see a particularly brilliant red in a 17th century Persian carpet, you might be looking at a color that traveled halfway around the world, a testament to the vast, interconnected web of global trade. Next, blue. The source of all natural blues, from the pale sky to the deep indigo of midnight, comes from the leaves of the indigo plant. The chemistry of indigo dyeing is completely different from madder, and is frankly bizarre. The indigo pigment itself is not soluble in water. To make it usable, it has to be put through a process of fermentation and chemical reduction in a vat. This was often done using stale urine, whose ammonia content helped create the necessary alkaline environment. So yes, that sublime heavenly blue in an antique carpet likely began its life in what was essentially a vat of pee. It's a quirky, if not fragrant, tidbit that puts a new spin on ancient secrets. You dip the yarn into this smelly, yellowish green liquid, and when you pulled it out, it would be a pale, ghostly green. But as the oxygen in the air hit the fibers, a chemical reaction would take place, and you would witness a miracle. The yarn would slowly, before your very eyes, transform into a deep, rich blue. Yellows and greens came from a whole host of plants. Weld, a tall, weedy plant, gave a clear, bright yellow. Saffron, the impossibly expensive stamens of the crocus flower, produced a yellow of unparalleled richness, usually reserved for royalty. Pomegranate rinds gave a more muted, golden yellow. To get green, a dyer would first dye the yarn yellow, and then dip it into the indigo vata tricky two-step process. Browns, grays, and blacks were derived from walnuts, oak galls, and iron salts. The black in many old carpets is often not a true black, but a supersaturated indigo or a corrosive iron-based dye that actually eats away at the wool over time, causing the areas of the pile outlined in black to be lower than the rest, a phenomenon called corrosion. The question of natural versus synthetic dyes is a major point of demarcation in the history of carpets. Historians still argue whether the introduction of synthetic aniline dyes in the late 19th century was a triumph of modern chemistry or the beginning of the end for the art form. These new dyes were cheap, easy to use, and produced incredibly bright, even garish, colors. But they were harsh, lacked the subtle variations of natural dyes, and faded terribly over time. A carpet woven with these early synthetic dyes might look vibrant at first, but would soon become a washed-out, lifeless thing. Connoisseurs call this period the Great Decline. Eventually, better synthetic chrome dyes were developed, but for purists, nothing can replace the abrash, the subtle, gentle variegation in color that comes from a master dyer working with a single pot of natural dye. That slight shift in color within a single field of blue is not a mistake. It's a sign of authenticity, a whisper from the dyer's hand. It's the proof that this object was born from nature, not just manufactured. That subtle variegation in color, the abrash, is a sign of authenticity, a whisper from the dyer's hand. Now, armed with hanks of yarn in every color from cochineal red to indigo blue, you return to the loom. The warp is stretched taut, the design is planned, and the moment of creation is at hand. It is time to tie the knots. This is the atomic unit of the carpet, a single tiny cell that, when repeated millions of times, creates a complex organism of pattern and color. The act of tying a knot seems simple, but the choice of which knot to tie is a fundamental decision that can define a rug's origin, its texture, and its very identity. There are two main types of knots used in Persian carpet weaving: the symmetrical knot and the asymmetrical knot. Let's start with the symmetrical one, also known as the Turkish or Giord's knot, named after an ancient weaving center in Anatolia. To understand it, picture two adjacent warp threads in front of you. You take your piece of dyed yarn, loop it around the front of the left warp thread, pass it behind, then bring it up between the two threads. Then you do the same on the right side. Loop it around the front of the right warp thread, pass it behind, and bring it up again between the two threads. The two ends of the yarn now stick out between the two warp threads. When you look down at it from above, you see the yarn has made a symmetrical collar around the two warp threads. You pull the knot tight and then use your hook knife to snip the ends, leaving a short, tufted pile. This symmetrical knot is incredibly secure. It creates a very strong, durable fabric with a pile that tends to be a bit chunkier and more defined. It's excellent for geometric designs, as it creates a clearer, more pixelated effect. The Pazyryk carpet, our frozen friend from the Altai Mountains, was woven using this very knot. This is a mainstream historical fact that tells us the symmetrical knot is at least 2,500 years old and was favored by tribal and nomadic weavers for its robustness. It produces a carpet that can take a beating, which is exactly what you need if your floor is also your suitcase. Now, let's look at its cousin, the asymmetrical knot, also known as the Persian or Sene knot. The name is a bit of a misnomer, as it's used far more widely than just the city of Sene. This knot is cleverer, more refined, and allows for much greater detail. Again, picture those two warp threads. This time, you loop your yarn around one warp thread completely, but only pass it behind the second warp thread. So, one end of the yarn comes up between the two warp threads, but the other end comes up on the outside of the pair. One side of the knot is open. It's not a full collar. Why does this matter? Because the asymmetrical knot is more compact. It allows you to pack more knots into the same amount of space. This results in a much higher knot density, which is the key to creating fine, curvilinear designs. You can't weave a graceful swirling vine or a delicate flower petal with chunky, pixel-like knots. You need the higher resolution that the Persian knot provides. It creates a denser, more velvety pile that feels incredibly plush underfoot. This is the knot of the city workshops, of the master designers who drew up intricate cartoons on graph. Paper for weavers to follow. It's the knot of opulence and sophistication. The choice between these two knots is one of the primary ways experts can identify the origin of a carpet. Historians and connoisseurs can often tell you the region, and sometimes even the specific village or tribe where a rug was made, simply by examining the knot type, the knot density, and the way the warp and weft are constructed. It's a form of textile forensics. For a quirky tidbit, there's even a third, much rarer knot called the Jufti knot. This knot is tied around 4 warp threads instead of 2. It's essentially a shortcut, a way to finish a carpet much faster. While it might look fine from the surface, a rug made with Jufti knots will have a much lower knot density and will be far less durable. It's often seen as a sign of a lower quality, more commercial piece. It's the weaving equivalent of using a paint roller instead of a fine-tipped brush. You get the job done, but you lose all the nuance. You are sitting now at the loom, perhaps as a young apprentice. Your fingers are clumsy at first. You fumble the yarn. You tie the knot too loosely. The master weaver sighs and makes you undo it. But slowly, with endless repetition, your hands learn the rhythm. Your fingers start to move without conscious thought, a fluid dance of looping, pulling, and snipping. You can tie hundreds, even thousands of knots in a day. You are following a pattern, either from a detailed drawing called a cartoon, pinned behind the warp threads, or, in a tribal setting, from a pattern held entirely in your memory, passed down through generations. You are not just a laborer. You are a living library of design. The density of these knots, measured in knots per square inch, kpsi, is a primary indicator of a carpet's quality and value. A coarse tribal rug might have 50 kpsi. A good quality city rug could have 400 kpsi. A truly exceptional, museum-quality silk masterpiece might have over 1,000 kpsi, with knots so small and tight they feel like velvet. The patience required for this is almost beyond modern comprehension. A single 9 by 12-foot carpet with a density of 500 kpsi contains over 7.7 million knots. If a weaver can tie 5,000 knots a day, which would be a brisk pace, it would take them over 4 years of full-time work to complete. Scholars still argue whether carpets of impossibly high knot counts. Some legendary pieces said to have 2,500 kpsi or more were actually functional floor coverings, or were always intended as pure works of art to be hung on a wall and admired. Like a painting, were they meant for the sole of the foot or the sole of the eye? Looking at the sheer labor involved, it's a question worth asking. Every single one of those millions of knots represents a choice, a movement, a moment in a weaver's life, slowly accumulating into a breathtaking whole. Every single one of those millions of knots represents a choice, a movement, a moment in a weaver's life, slowly accumulating into a breathtaking whole. But what story are those knots telling? What world are they building, row by painstaking? Row? Now that you understand the physical creation, the fiber, the loom, the dyes, the knots, you can finally step into the world of the carpet itself. And the first and most enduring world you will find is a garden. Not just any garden, but a perfect, idealized garden. A paradise. The very word paradise comes to us from the old Persian paradisa, which means a walled enclosure. This is a profoundly important concept. In the harsh, arid landscape of ancient Persia, a garden was the ultimate symbol of life, tranquility, and divine favor. It was an oasis, a carefully cultivated refuge from the chaos and brutality of the wilderness. Outside its walls, a place with shade, with the sound of running water, with the scent of flowers and the taste of fruit. It was heaven on earth. And the Persian carpet, in its most classic form, is a portable paradisa. It's a garden you can roll up and carry. With you, a patch of paradise you can lay down anywhere. From a nomad's tent to a king's audience hall, you are looking down at one now. The design is formal, symmetrical, and deeply symbolic. This is the classic Chahar Bagh, or four gardens design. The entire field of the carpet is divided into 4 quadrants by water channels. This is a direct representation of the 4 rivers of paradise mentioned in both the Avesta, the holy book of Zoroastrianism, and later in the Quran. These channels, often a vibrant blue, flow from a central point, which might be a pool or a fountain represented by a small central medallion. The water represents life, purity, and the divine source of all creation. The 4-part division represents the 4 corners of the universe, all brought into harmonious order. Within each of the 4 quadrants, the garden blooms. You see stylized willow trees, symbols of morning, but also of renewal and eternal life. You see tall, elegant cypress trees, their evergreen nature, a powerful symbol of immortality, pointing from the earth towards the heavens. There are pomegranate trees, their fruits bursting with seeds, representing fertility and abundance. There are flowering shrubs, blossoming vines, and a whole menagerie of birds. You might see a nightingale singing to a rose, a classic Persian poetic motif symbolizing the lover's longing for the beloved, or the soul's yearning for God. This is not just a picture of a garden. It is a theological and philosophical map. It is a space designed for contemplation. The mainstream historical fact here is that this garden design is incredibly ancient. The Persian king Cyrus the Great, who founded the Achaemenid Empire in the Ulai, 6th century BCE, was famous for his magnificent gardens at his capital, Asargadi. Archaeological excavations have revealed the stone water channels of his palace garden, laid out in the very same Chahar Bagh plan. So when you look at a garden carpet from the 17th century, you are looking at a design tradition that is, at its core, over 2,000 years old. It's a testament to the enduring power of this idea of a contained, orderly, and life-giving paradise. Of course, the interpretation of these gardens is not always straightforward. Historians still argue whether these designs were meant to be read purely as religious allegories, or if they also served a more secular psychological purpose. Was this a map of the afterlife, or was it a kind of ancient therapy, a tool for calming the mind and creating a sense of peace in a turbulent world? The answer is likely both. For a king, laying out his domain on a garden carpet was a way of projecting power and control, showing that he, like a divine gardener, could bring order to the world. For a mystic, meditating on the same carpet could be a journey inward, following the water channels back to the central source of all being. For a quirky tidbit, consider the fish that are often depicted swimming in the water channels. At first glance, they are just a charming decorative detail, but they too have a deeper meaning. Fish are constantly watchful, their eyes always open. They are seen as guardians against the evil eye, silent protectors of the garden's sanctity. They also have an astronomical connection, being linked to the zodiac sign of Pisces, which marks the spring equinox and the Persian New Year, Nowruz. So these little fish are not just fish. They are symbols of vigilance, renewal, and the cyclical nature of time. It's this layering of meaning, from the obvious to the esoteric, that gives these carpets their endless fascination. You let your eyes wander through this woven paradise. You see the incredible detail in a single blossom, the way the weaver used 10 different shades of red and pink to give it depth and life. You notice the subtle abrash in the blue of the water channels, giving it the shimmering, moving quality of real water. This is a garden that will never fade, a spring that will never end. It's a profound act of optimism and faith, a declaration that even in the harshest of environments, beauty and order can be created. It's an invitation to step out of the mundane world and into a space of perfect, eternal harmony. But paradise is not always serene. Sometimes the garden is a stage for action, a place of drama and danger, filled with creatures both real and imagined. But paradise is not always serene. Sometimes the garden is a stage for action, a place of drama and danger, filled with creatures both real and imagined. You shift your gaze from the tranquil geometry of the garden carpet to a different kind of scene, one teeming with energy and life. This is the hunting carpet, a design that became incredibly popular in the royal courts, especially during the Safavid dynasty in the 16th and 17th centuries. Here, the serene landscape of paradise is transformed into a royal hunting ground, a theater of aristocratic power and cosmic struggle. The scene is a whirlwind of motion. You see noblemen on horseback, their bows drawn taut, their lances aimed. They are dressed in opulent finery, their status clear from their clothing and the magnificent gear on their horses. They are not hunting for sustenance. They are hunting for sport, a classic pastime of Persian royalty for millennia. The hunt was more than a leisure activity. It was a display of martial prowess, a form of training for war, and a powerful metaphor for the king's role as the one who imposes order on the wildness of nature. He is the master of his domain, both the civilized world and the untamed one. Animals they are hunting are a mix of the real and the fantastical. You see lions, the ultimate symbol of royalty and courage, leaping to attack a deer or a wild boar. The depiction of the lion is often fierce and majestic, a worthy adversary for a king. The lion is not just an animal. It is the embodiment of the king's own valor. By conquering the lion, the king proves his divine right to rule. You see graceful gazelles fleeing, their bodies contorted in elegant, almost balletic poses. You see boars, symbols of ferocity and brute strength, charging out of the undergrowth dot, but then your eye catches something stranger. Among the familiar animals, you see a dragon, its serpentine body coiled, breathing fire and a majestic phoenix-like bird. This is the simurg, a benevolent, mythical bird from Persian mythology. A battle between the dragon, representing evil, or chaos, and the simurg, representing good and spiritual enlightenment, is an ancient Zoroastrian motif. The king, by participating in this hunt, is not just chasing game. He is aligning himself with the forces of good in the cosmic battle against evil. His earthly hunt is a mirror of a divine struggle. This is a mainstream historical fact. These hunting carpets were not just decorative floor coverings. They were complex pieces of political propaganda, designed to glorify the ruler and legitimize his reign through powerful symbolic imagery. The level of detail in these scenes is astonishing. You can see the pattern on the hunter's robes, the individual feathers on the simurg's wing, the terror in the eyes of a fleeing rabbit. To achieve this, weavers used the finest wool and silk and the highest possible knot counts. These were not the products of a nomadic tent, but of highly organized royal workshops, where master designers created the complex cartoons and teams of weavers, often children because of their nimble fingers, worked for years to execute them. Decode some of the other creatures you might find hidden in the weave of various carpets. The peacock, with its magnificent tail, is a symbol of immortality, royalty, and, in some contexts, the all-seeing eye of God. The dog is a symbol of protection and loyalty, a trusted guardian. The camel, a creature of the desert, represents wealth, endurance, and fortitude. Seeing a camel in a carpet is a nod to the realities of trade and travel that were the lifeblood of the culture. Even insects have their place. The spider is often seen as a symbol of the weaver herself, a patient and creative force. For a quirky tidbit, consider the depiction of bats. In Western culture, bats are often associated with darkness and vampires. But in some Persian traditions, the bat was a symbol of good fortune and happiness. Because it lived in dark caves and emerged at night, it was believed to be a Blado, guide souls through the darkness of the underworld towards the light. So finding a bat woven into your carpet might be a secret wish for a happy afterlife. It's a classic example of how the symbolic meaning of an animal can change dramatically from one culture to another. The representation of these animals is a source of ongoing scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether the weavers and owners of these carpets in, say, the 18th or 19th century still understood the deep, ancient Zoroastrian or mythological meanings behind the symbols they were weaving. Did the weaver who nodded a griffin into a border think of it as a powerful guardian from Achaemenid lore, or had it become just a griffin-shaped motif, a traditional element whose original meaning was lost to time? It's the age-old question of symbol versus decoration. Did the form outlive the function? In many cases, it's likely a bit of both. The designs were passed down because they were beautiful and traditional, but they retained a kind of spiritual resonance, an echo of their original power. Even if the specific story had been forgotten, the animals in a Persian carpet are not just decoration. They are a language. They tell stories of power, of faith, of the struggle between order and chaos, and of the deep connection between the human, natural, and divine worlds. They populate the woven garden, turning it from a static paradise into a living ecosystem of meaning. But at the very center of many of these worlds, whether a garden or a hunt, lies another powerful, hypnotic symbol, the medallion. The animals in a Persian carpet are not just decoration. They are a language. They populate the woven garden, turning it from a static paradise into a living ecosystem of meaning. But at the very center of many of these worlds, whether a garden or a hunt, lies another powerful, hypnotic symbol, the medallion. Your eye is inevitably drawn to it. It sits in the dead center of the carpet, a focal point of immense gravity, pulling the rest of the design into its orbit. It can be circular, star-shaped, lobed, or diamond-like, but its purpose is always the same: to draw you in, to focus your attention, to provide a center for the universe of the rug. The central medallion is a mandala. It is a symbolic representation of the cosmos, a diagram of the divine. You can see this design principle in sacred art all over the world, from the rose windows of Gothic cathedrals to the sand paintings of Tibetan monks. The idea is to create a portal, a point of concentration that allows the mind to move from the chaotic outer world to a serene inner center. When you look at a medallion carpet, you are not just seeing a pattern. You are being given a tool for meditation. Your eye follows the intricate, layered geometry, moving from the outer edges of the medallion towards its core, a journey that mirrors the mystic's path toward enlightenment or union with the divine. Let's dissect a typical medallion. It is rarely a single, simple shape. It is often a complex, multi-layered construction. At its very heart, there might be a tiny, perfect rosette, a flower symbolizing the source of all creation. Radiating out from this center are concentric bands of color and pattern. You might see a ring of delicate, scrolling vines, called arabesques. They're endless, flowing lines representing the infinite and eternal nature of God. Then, another layer might be a star with 8, 12, or 16 points, each point a ray of divine light shining out into the universe. The geometry is precise, mathematical, and deeply satisfying to the human eye, which is naturally drawn to symmetry and order. This style of design became particularly dominant in the great city workshops of Persia. such as Tabriz, Isfahan, and Khasan, from the 5th century onwards. The mainstream historical fact is that the development of the central medallion design was heavily influenced by the art of the book specifically. The gorgeously illuminated manuscripts and decorated leather bookbindings of the Timurid and Umayyad Safavid periods. Calligraphers and illuminators were the superstar artists of their day, and their designs for the covers and frontispieces of the Quran and epic poems were a major source of inspiration for carpet designers. The central medallion, corner spandrels, and intricate borders of a carpet are, in essence, a translation of a book cover into a textile medium. The carpet becomes a single giant page from a holy book laid out on the floor. Often, the central medallion doesn't float alone in the field of the carpet. It is connected via a stem or a pendant to smaller medallions or cartouches at the top and bottom. This creates a powerful vertical axis, reinforcing the connection between the heavens above and the earth below. The four corners of the main field, outside the medallion, are often filled with spandrels or corner pieces, which are typically a quarter section of the main medallion. This clever design trick creates the illusion that the field is just a window, and you are only seeing a small portion of an infinite, repeating pattern that extends forever in all directions. It's a profound philosophical statement made with pattern. What you see is just a small piece of a much larger, divine order. For a quirky tidbit, let's consider the concept of the dome of heaven. Some scholars believe that the central medallion design is a two-dimensional representation of the view, looking up into the intricately tiled dome of a mosque. The central point of the medallion is the apex of the dome, and the radiating patterns are the muqarnas, the honeycomb-like architectural vaulting that was a hallmark of Islamic architecture. When you stood on such a carpet inside a palace or a mosque, you would have this incredible symbolic resonance. The dome of heaven on the floor mirroring the architectural dome of heaven above you. You would be standing in a perfectly aligned cosmos, sandwiched between two representations of the divine. However, the exact origin and meaning of the medallion remain a subject of debate among scholars. Historians still argue whether the medallion is a purely Islamic invention or if it has much older, pre-Islamic roots. Some see echoes of the sunburst symbols of Mithraism, an ancient Persian religion that predated Zoroastrianism. Others see connections to the sacred geometry of the ancient Greeks or the celestial diagrams of Babylonian astronomers. The truth is likely that the medallion is a syncretic symbol, one that has absorbed and reinterpreted meanings from many different cultures and belief systems over thousands of years. It's so powerful precisely because it speaks a universal language of centers, radiation, and cosmic order. Not all carpets have a central medallion, of course. Many tribal and village rugs feature an all-over or repeating pattern, where small geometric motifs are scattered across the entire field. This creates a very different feeling. Instead of a single hypnotic focal point, you get a rhythmic, almost hypnotic sense of infinite repetition. Think of a field of flowers or the patterns of waves on the sea. These designs feel more grounded, more connected to the rhythms of nature and to the abstract theology of the cosmos. The choice between a central medallion and an all-over pattern is one of the fundamental divides in Persian carpet design, often separating the formal, urban, courtly tradition from the more rustic, organic, and folkloric tradition of the countryside. But whether your eye is drawn to a single blazing sun or lost in a sea of repeating diamonds, the carpet is always working on you, shaping your perception, and telling you a story about your place in the universe. The carpet is always working on you, shaping your perception, and telling you a story about your place in the universe. It guides your eye, sometimes to a central blazing sun of a medallion, and sometimes across an endless repeating field. But no matter what happens in the center, the entire world of the carpet is contained protected, and defined by its borders. If the central field is the story, the borders are the book cover, the picture frame, and the security guard all rolled into one. They are far more than just decoration. They are a vital and symbolic part of the whole. Look closely at the edge of almost any Persian carpet. You will rarely find just one single frame. Instead, you'll see a series of multiple guard bands, a complex system of main and minor borders that work together to create a visual and psychological transition from the outside world to the sacred or special space of the carpet's interior. You might have a wide main border, flanked on either side by 1, 2, or even 3 narrower minor borders. This layering effect creates a powerful sense of depth and enclosure. It's like passing through a series of gates or courtyards before you reach the inner sanctum of a palace or temple. You are being prepared for what you are about to see in the center. The main border is where the most significant action happens. It's a canvas for its own elaborate designs. One of the most common and classic border designs is the Herati pattern. This consists of a flower, usually a rosette, inside a diamond, with 2 curving feathery leaves surrounding it on the outside. These leaves are often interpreted as swimming fish, leading to its nickname, the fish pattern. Repeated over and over, this motif creates a flowing rhythmic band of decoration that is both elegant and energetic. The mainstream historical fact is that the Herati pattern is one of the most ubiquitous motifs in all of Persian weaving, found in carpets from all over the country for centuries. Its exact origin is debated, but it's named for the city of Herat in modern-day Afghanistan, which was a major cultural and artistic center in the 15th century. Another classic border motif is the running dog, or reciprocal border. This is a simple but powerful geometric design of interlocking hooks or crenellations, often in starkly contrasting colors. It looks like a row of breaking waves or the battlements of a fortress. This design is thought to have a protective function. The sharp, angular, and unending nature of the pattern is believed to confuse and ward off evil spirits, preventing them from entering the central field of the carpet. It's a symbolic fence, a magical barrier against bad luck or malevolent forces. You often see this on tribal rugs, where the belief in such things was a very real and present part of daily life. The minor borders that flank the main one often feature simpler, more delicate patterns. A common one is a simple meandering vine with small flowers or buds, a motif known as a shrub border. This creates a gentle, organic frame that softens the transition between the powerful main border and the field. You might also see a simple, geometric ribbon or a series of small, repeated rosettes. The interplay between the bold main border and the delicate minor borders is a key part of the carpet's aesthetic success. It's a lesson in visual hierarchy, showing how different elements can work together to create a balanced and harmonious whole. For a quirky tidbit, let's look at the outermost edge of the carpet, the very last thing before the fringe. This is the selvage, where the weft threads are wrapped around the outer warp threads to create a reinforced edge. The way this selvage is finished is another clue for the expert. Is it a single cord, or is it made of multiple cords overwrapped? With wool? Is the wool one color, or does it alternate between 2 or 3 colors, creating a barber pole effect? These tiny details, which a casual observer would never notice, can speak volumes about the rug's tribal origins. It's like a secret handshake woven into the edge of the rug. The symbolic meaning of the border as a guardian is a deep and ancient one. Historians still argue whether the primary function of the border was aesthetic or apotropaic, that is, intended to ward off evil. Was it just a nice way to frame the picture, or was it a serious magical defense system? In the worldview of the people who made and used these carpets, this is likely a false distinction. Beauty and spiritual power were not separate categories. A beautiful, well-ordered design was inherently powerful and protective. The harmony and integrity of the border were what gave it its strength. A break in the pattern or a sloppy design wasn't just ugly. It was a potential breach in the defenses. The borders also tell a story about time and influence. You can sometimes see motifs in a border that are much, much older than the design in the central field. For example, a 19th century city carpet with a sophisticated floral medallion might have a main border filled with stark, ancient-looking geometric shapes that harken back to a nomadic, tribal past. It's as if the weaver is acknowledging their artistic ancestry, framing their modern creation with the symbols of their deep history. The border becomes a space for history and tradition, while the field is a space for innovation and contemporary. Style. So the next time you look at a Persian carpet, don't let your eye rush to the center. Spend some time in the borders. Follow the flow of the Herati pattern, trace the jagged path of the running dog, and appreciate the delicate dance of the meandering vines. You are in the liminal space, the threshold. The borders are the gatekeepers of the carpet's world, the guardians of its stories, and a story in and of themselves. They show us that in this art form, every single part of the canvas, from the blazing center to the humble edge, is infused with meaning, history, and intention. Every single part of the canvas, from the blazing center to the humble edge, is infused with meaning, history, and intention. You have explored the grand designs, the paradise gardens, the royal hunts, the cosmic medallions, and the protective borders. These are the public statements of the carpet, the shared cultural language. But hidden within the grand symphony, there are quieter, more personal notes. These are the whispers of the weaver, the small acts of rebellion, creativity, and humanity that transform a beautiful object into a moving one. This is where you find the soul of the person who sat at the loom for months or years, tying every one of those millions of knots. One of the most charming and humanizing features you can find in a hand-woven carpet is what is known as a deliberate imperfection. In many weaving traditions, there is a belief that only God can create something perfect. For a mortal to create a flawless work of art would be an act of hubris, an arrogant challenge to the divine. To avoid this, a weaver might intentionally introduce a small mistake into the pattern. It could be a single knot of the wrong color in a large field of blue, a slight break in the symmetry of a border design, or a flower with one petal that is a different shape from the others. It is a humble acknowledgement of human fallibility and a sign of respect for a higher power. It is the spirit line or the Persian flaw. Finding one of these flaws is a moment of connection. You are no longer just looking at a pattern. You are seeing a specific, conscious choice made by an individual hundreds of years ago. It's a tiny wink across the centuries. Of course not. Every mistake is a deliberate act of piety. Many imperfections are simply, imperfections. They are the honest traces of the weaving process. Maybe the weaver was tired that day, or got distracted by a child or a conversation. Maybe they ran out of a particular batch of dyed wool and had to start a new one, resulting in that subtle shift of color known as a brash. These are not the flaws of a machine-made object. They are the texture of a human life, woven directly into the fabric. They are what separates the soulful from the sterile. Sometimes weavers leave more than just an intentional mistake. They leave their signature. In the more formal city carpets, especially from the 19th and 20th centuries, it's not uncommon to find a signature cartouche woven into the border. This small panel might contain the name of the master weaver or the workshop owner, often rendered in elegant Farsi calligraphy. For example, you might see Amal-i-Mohtasham, the work of Mohtasham, identifying it as a piece from the legendary Kashan workshop of Haji Mala Mohammed Hassan Mohtasham. This is a mainstream historical fact. These signatures act like a famous painter's signature, adding immense value and historical provenance to a carpet. They were a mark of pride and a form of branding in a highly competitive market. But in the more personal, tribal rugs, the signatures are often more subtle and symbolic. A weaver might not use her name, but she might weave a small, stylized animal or a unique geometric motif that was her personal mark, known only to her family and her community. It was her way of saying, "I was here. I made this. These are the anonymous masterpieces, signed with a secret." Historians still argue whether certain geometric motifs found repeatedly in the rugs of a particular tribe represent the signature of an entire clan or of a single, highly influential weaver whose work was copied by others. It's a difficult question to answer when dealing with a culture that prized collective identity over individual fame. Beyond signatures and flaws, weavers often embedded personal stories and wishes into their work. A woman weaving a rug for her dowry might include symbols of fertility and good fortune, like pomegranates and fish. She wasn't just weaving a floor covering. She was weaving her hopes and dreams for her future life. A rug might contain a small, seemingly random human or animal figure that has no relation to the overall design. This could be a depiction of a beloved child or a favorite pet, a private memento hidden in plain sight. For a quirky tidbit, consider the lazy lines you sometimes see in antique carpets. These are diagonal lines or breaks in the weave that run across the fabric. They are not part of the design. They occur when a weaver is working on a wide rug, but can't comfortably reach all the way across. So she might weave one section up for several inches and then move over to weave the next section, rather than completing one full row at a time. The diagonal join where these sections meet is the lazy line. Far from being a flaw, these lines are now seen by collectors as a charming sign of authenticity, a clear indicator of a small workshop or village origin, where a single weaver worked on a rug that was perhaps a little too big for her. It's an intimate glimpse into the ergonomics of the craft. Ultimately, the soul of the weaver resides in the thousand small choices she made. The exact shade of red she chose for a rose petal. The way she interpreted a traditional pattern making it slightly her own. The density and tightness of her knots, a physical manifestation of her skill and patience. We can analyze the grand structures, the medallions and borders, and understand the formal language of the carpet. But it is in these small human touches, the deliberate flaw, the secret signature, the subtle variations, that we can feel the presence of the Creator. It's the difference between reading a printed book and reading a handwritten letter. The printed book is perfect and clear. The letter has smudges, crossouts, and a unique handwriting that tells you more than just the words on the page. These carpets are handwritten letters from the past, each one bearing the unique and irreplaceable touch of its author. These carpets are handwritten letters from the past, each one bearing the unique and irreplaceable touch of its author. And while many of these letters were written in humble tents and quiet villages, some were composed in the most opulent and powerful settings imaginable. The art of the Persian carpet, with its deep roots in nomadic life, reached its absolute zenith not in the wilderness, but in the heart of the empire. To understand this, you must travel back in time to the 16th and 17th centuries, to the golden age of the Safavid dynasty. You are now in Isfahan, the magnificent capital city established by Shah Abbas the Great, who reigned from 1588 to 1629. The city itself is a masterpiece. You stand in the Nakshi Jahan Square, one of the largest public squares in the world, surrounded by the breathtaking blue-tiled domes and minarets of the Shah Mosque, the Sheikh Lotfallah Mosque, and the grand entrance to the Imperial Bazaar. The air hums with the energy of a global superpower at its peak. This is the center of a vast empire that stretched from the Ottoman border to the lands of the Mughals in India. And Shah Abbas, a brilliant military strategist and a visionary patron of the arts, understood that art was not just a decoration. It was an instrument of statecraft. Under Shah Abbas, carpet weaving was transformed from a folk art and a commercial commodity into a major royal industry. He established court-sponsored workshops in cities like Isfahan, Kashan, and Kerman. These were not small, family-run operations. They were large, highly organized manufactories, employing hundreds of the most talented people in the empire. A mainstream historical fact from this period is the clear division of labor. There was the master designer, Nagish, who created the complex patterns on paper; the dyer, Rengraz, who perfected the vibrant and subtle color palette; and the weavers, Efendigan, who executed the design at the loom. This system allowed for a level of complexity and scale that had never been seen before. The carpets produced in these royal workshops were not destined for the floors of ordinary homes. They were created as diplomatic gifts for European monarchs and Ottoman sultans, as furnishings for the Shah's own palaces and mosques, and as powerful symbols of Persian prestige and wealth. The materials were the finest obtainable, lustrous wool from specially bred sheep, and shimmering silk imported or produced locally in vast quantities. Some of the most famous carpets in the world, like the Ardabil carpet that now hangs in London's Victoria and Albert Museum, were products of this era. The Ardabil, and its twin now in Los Angeles, were woven around 1540 for the shrine of a Safavid ancestor. Its incredible density of over 300 knots per square inch, its vast size, and its perfectly executed central medallion design represent the absolute pinnacle of the art form. Let's look at the designs that emerged from this period, while they drew on the traditional vocabulary of medallions, gardens, and arabesques. They did so with a newfound sophistication and naturalism. The flowers in a Safavid carpet are not stark, geometric symbols. They are recognizable species: roses, lily, irises, rendered with almost botanical accuracy. The scrolling vines, or islami, are fluid and graceful, creating a sense of dynamic, organic growth. The vase carpets of Kerman, for example, feature a complex, asymmetrical lattice of vines climbing up the length of the rug, with large palmettes and flowers appearing to burst from ornate vases. This was a new level of artistic confidence, a move away from stiff formality towards a more painterly and dynamic style. For a quirky and rather luxurious tidbit, consider the Polonaise carpets. This is a special group of 17th century silk carpets, often interwoven with gold and silver threads that were once mistakenly thought to be polish. In reality, they were woven in Isfahan, many specifically for export to European nobles or as diplomatic gifts. Their name comes from the fact that several of them were found in the possession of Polish aristocrats, some even bearing their coats of arms. These carpets are the definition of opulence. The metallic threads would have shimmered and glittered in the candlelight of a European palace, creating an effect of almost unimaginable luxury. They were the ultimate status symbol, a piece of exotic Persian splendor that no European weaver could hope to replicate. The establishment of these royal workshops, however, had a complex effect on the art form. Historians still argue whether the centralization and commercialization of carpet weaving under the Safavids elevated the craft to its highest point, or sowed the seeds of its decline. On one hand, the patronage of the court pushed the technical and artistic boundaries of weaving to unprecedented heights, creating masterpieces that have never been surpassed. On the other hand, it changed the role of the weaver. In the tribal tradition, the weaver was also the designer, the artist who held the patterns in her head. In the city workshop, the weaver became more of a technician, a highly skilled laborer, executing a design created by someone else. The direct, personal connection between the creator and the creation was, in some ways, severed. The Safavid Golden Age came to an end in the early 18th century, when Isfahan was sacked by Afghan invaders, throwing the empire into chaos. The royal workshops were disbanded, and the production of these magnificent court carpets ceased. But the legacy of the Safavid period was immense. The designs and techniques developed in the royal workshops filtered down into the commercial and village weaving traditions, influencing carpet design for centuries to come. The Safavid masters created a new classical language for the Persian carpet, a standard of excellence against which all subsequent carpets would be measured. They took an ancient folk art and elevated it into one of the great imperial arts of the world, forever changing the story of the threads. The Safavid masters created a new classical language for the Persian carpet, a standard of excellence against which all subsequent carpets would be measured. They took an ancient folk art and elevated it into one of the great imperial arts of the world, forever changing the story of the threads. But that classical, courtly language was never the only one being spoken. While the sophisticated workshops of Isfahan and Kashan were producing their fine, floral masterpieces, a parallel universe of weaving continued to thrive in the mountains and plains. This is the world of the tribal rug, and its aesthetic is a world away from the polished elegance of the city. Imagine you've left the glittering tiled city of Isfahan behind. You've traveled for days, back into the rugged Zagros Mountains, and you are now sharing a cup of tea in the tent of a Qashqai nomad. The carpet on the floor here is not a vast, shimmering expanse of silk and intricate vines. It is smaller, more rustic. The wool feels thicker, more robust under your hand. The colors are bold and saturated deep reds, rich blues, and strong oranges. And the design. The design is a riot of powerful geometric shapes. There are no graceful, curving lines here. Instead, you see stark, serrated diamonds, stylized animals that look more like ancient pictographs than realistic depictions, and bold, angular hooks. This is a different dialect, a language of strength, spontaneity, and deep, ancestral memory. This fundamental difference between the city rug and the tribal rug is the most important distinction in the world of Persian carpets. The city rug is the product of a settled urban culture. It is based on a cartoon, a precise pre-planned design drawn out by a master artist. It is a product of specialization, with a designer, a dyer, and a weaver all playing their part. Its aesthetic values are harmony, grace, and technical perfection. The goal is to create a flawless, luxurious object that speaks of wealth and sophistication. The tribal rug, on the other hand, is the product of a nomadic or semi-nomadic life. It is woven on a simple, portable horizontal loom. The weaver is the artist. There is no cartoon on paper. The design comes from her memory, from the traditions of her tribe, and from her own creative spirit. She might start with a traditional layout, but she is free to improvise, to add a personal motif, to change a color on a whim. This is why tribal rugs have a vitality, a spontaneity that is rarely found in their city cousins. You can feel the weaver's hand, her personality, in every knot. Its aesthetic values are strength, boldness, and symbolic power. The goal is to create an object that is both functional and a vibrant expression of cultural identity. Let's look closer at some of the great weaving tribes. The Qashqai, a confederation of Turkic-speaking tribes in southern Persia, are famous for their bold, confident designs. A classic Qashqai rug might feature a central diamond-shaped medallion, or a series of 3 medallions on a rich red or blue field. The field itself is often filled with a dense array of small, stylized motifs, animals, birds, rosettes, and geometric forms. Their lions are particularly famous, not the realistic lions of the Safavid hunt carpets, but highly stylized, almost cartoonish figures that are full of character and power. A mainstream historical fact is that these tribal groups were not isolated. They were the backbone of the military and the pastoral economy, and their weavings were a primary source of income and a badge of their identity. Further north, you have the Kurds, a fierce and ancient people who live in the mountainous regions of western Iran. Kurdish rugs are known for their heavy, durable construction, and they're often somber but rich color palettes. They frequently use an all-over pattern, like the Harati or a simple repeating diamond, rather than a central medallion. They are built to last, a reflection of the harsh environment and the resilient character of the people who make them. For a quirky tidbit, consider the weavings of the Baluch tribes in the southeast, near the borders of Afghanistan and Pakistan. Baluch rugs are instantly recognizable for their dark, broody color schemes. Deep reds, browns, purples, and dark blues are common, often with highlights of white or orange. They are famous for their prayer rugs, which often feature a highly stylized tree of life design in the prayer niche or mihrab. But what's truly unique is the kilim. They often have very wide, intricately patterned flat-woven sections at both ends of the rug, which are as decorative and complex as the knotted pile itself. It's a signature feature that sets them apart. This stark contrast between city and tribal aesthetics has led to a long-running debate among collectors and scholars. For a long time, the formal, technically perfect city carpets were considered the high art, while the rustic tribal weavings were dismissed as primitive or folk art. But in the 20th century, a major shift in taste occurred, partly influenced by the modernist art movement in the West. Artists like Paul Klee and Henri Matisse were drawn to the bold colors, abstract geometry, and raw expressive power of what they called primitive art. Suddenly, the imperfections and improvisations of tribal rugs were not seen as flaws, but as signs of authenticity and artistic genius. Historians still argue whether this Western re-evaluation of tribal art truly appreciated it on its own terms or simply projected a modernist noble savage fantasy onto it. In reality, the line between city and village is not always so clear-cut. There is a whole spectrum in between. A village rug might be woven in a settled agricultural community, but it will often use the geometric designs and techniques of the local tribes. However, because it's woven on a more permanent vertical loom, it might be more regular in shape than a true nomadic piece. These village rugs blend the raw power of the tribal aesthetic with a bit more of the regularity of a city carpet, creating a unique and charming hybrid. They are a reminder that culture is not a set of neat boxes, but a flowing, interconnected river of ideas. They are a reminder that culture is not a set of neat boxes, but a flowing, interconnected river of ideas. The city carpet and the tribal rug may speak in different dialects, but they are part of the same language, a language that imbues a simple, household object with layers of profound meaning. We've seen how carpets function as art, as status symbols, as maps of paradise, and as personal diaries. But their function in Persian society was even more varied and fundamental than that. A carpet was never just a floor covering. It was a multi-tool, a versatile piece of technology that served a dozen different roles in daily life. From the sacred to the mundane. The most obvious and primary function, of course, is creating a comfortable and clean space. In a traditional Persian home, even in a settled city house, furniture was minimal. People sat, ate, socialized, and slept on the floor. The carpet was the furniture. It was the sofa, the dining table, the bed. A room would be lined with long, narrow runners, called kinera, around the perimeter for sitting, with a larger, more important carpet, a mayan farsh, in the center. The quality and beauty of your carpets were a direct reflection of your hospitality and your station in life. Rolling out a special carpet for an honored guest was, and still is, a fundamental gesture of respect. But beyond the floor, the carpet moved into the sacred realm. You are in a mosque, the air cool and silent. The vast floor is covered wall to wall with carpets, all laid out so that their designs orient the faithful towards the Qibla, the direction of Mecca. Here, the carpet defines the sacred space, providing a clean and beautiful surface for the daily prayers. The individual prayer rug, or sayyadi, is perhaps the most personal and intimate type of carpet. It is a portable sanctuary. Its design is almost always directional, featuring a prayer niche or mihrab at one end. The mihrab is a stylized archway that represents the gateway to paradise. When a person unrolls their prayer rug and kneels within the arch, they are symbolically stepping into a sacred space, a private mosque. No matter where they are, these prayer rugs are often filled with religious symbolism. You might see a comb woven into the design, a reminder to be clean and pure before prayer. A water ewer, or aftabay, symbolizes the ritual ablutions required before worship. Often, you will see a pair of hands woven on either side of the prayer niche, indicating where to place your own hands during prostration. A mainstream historical fact is that the design of the mihrab on prayer rugs is directly inspired by the architectural niche found in the Qibla wall of every mosque. The rug is a miniature, portable piece of sacred architecture. Carpets also functioned as a form of currency and wealth. In a world before complex banking systems, a fine carpet was a secure and portable asset. A tribal family's wealth was not in a bank account. It was in their flocks and in the carpets they wove. A good silk carpet was as valuable as gold, but far more beautiful. They were a key part of a bride's dowry, a tangible representation of her family's status and her own skill. They were traded for goods, used to pay taxes, and passed down through generations as precious heirlooms. The value was not just abstract. It was understood by everyone. You could literally roll up your savings account and load it onto a camel. For a quirky and slightly morbid tidbit, carpets played a role in both life and death. You've seen how they furnished the home, but they also furnished the grave. Remember our friend the Paziric chieftain? He was buried with his magnificent carpet to ensure he would have comfort and status in the afterlife. Carpets were also used as ceremonial shrouds or coffin covers for important individuals. A beautiful carpet was a fitting final garment for a life well lived. Beyond these major roles, the versatility of Persian weaving is astonishing. Heavy, flat-woven kilims were used as tent walls and dividers. Special sofra were woven as cloths, to be laid on the floor, upon which food would be served. You could eat your dinner off of one beautiful textile, while sitting on another. There were specially made saddlebags, korjin, and larger transport bags, mafrash, used by nomads to carry their belongings. These weren't just plain sacks. They were often gorgeously decorated with the tribe's signature patterns and adorned with colorful tassels and shells. Your luggage was a work of art. Even the animals were decorated with woven trappings. Function of a carpet could also be purely communicative. Among the most fascinating and debated types of carpets are the so-called garden carpets of paradise from the late Safavid or post-Safavid era, which some scholars believe are not just generic gardens. Historians still argue whether some of these carpets are, in fact, literal maps of specific famous royal gardens, woven as a tribute or a commemoration. The idea is tantalizing, that you could be looking at a bird's-eye view of a real place, a landscape that has long since turned to dust, preserved forever in wool and silk. It would mean the carpet is not just a symbol, but a document. From a prayer rug connecting a single soul to God, to a saddlebag carrying grain, to a royal carpet acting as a diplomatic envoy, the Persian carpet is an object of almost unparalleled functional and symbolic diversity. It is not a passive object of beauty to be admired from a distance. It is an active participant in the culture, woven into the very fabric of life, from the cradle to the grave. It is a floor, a bed, a table, a map, a bank, a sanctuary, and a storybook all at once. It is a floor, a bed, a table, a map, a bank, a sanctuary, and a storybook all at once. Having journeyed from the freezing tomb in the Altai Mountains to the sun-drenched courtyards of Isfahan, from the humble nomad's tent to the Grand Shah's palace, you have seen the threads of this story come together. You have felt the greasy wool of the sheep, heard the rhythmic thwack of the loom, and smelled the alchemical aromas of the dyer's quarter. You've learned the secret language of the knots, the gardens, the beasts, and the borders. Now, as our journey nears its end, you stand back and look at the Persian carpet, not just as a historical artifact, but as a living object, a carrier of silent stories that continue to echo across the centuries. The story of the carpet did not end with the fall of the Safavids. It has continued to evolve, adapting to new realities. The 19th century brought a huge surge in demand from the West. European and American merchants, recognizing the immense artistry and commercial potential, established their own companies. In Persia, commissioning carpets specifically tailored to Western tastes. This American saruk, or British kashan, often featured softer, more decorative color palettes and less complex designs to suit Victorian and Edwardian drawing rooms. This commercial pressure is a complicated legacy. It revived the industry from a period of decline, but it also standardized and, some would argue, diluted the art form, prioritizing market demands over indigenous expression. Today, the world of the Persian carpet faces new challenges. The painstaking, time-consuming process of hand-weaving struggles to compete in a world of instant gratification and mass production. Many of the nomadic traditions are fading as people move to cities. The younger generation doesn't always have the patience or the economic incentive to learn the craft of their ancestors. And yet, the art form endures. In small villages and bustling city workshops, weavers still sit at their looms. Master dyers still brew their ancient recipes of madder and indigo. The knots are still tied, one by one. The carpet you see in a museum, hanging silent and still on a wall under carefully controlled lighting, is only a shadow of its former self. You are seeing it divorced from its context. Imagine it instead in its intended environment. Picture the Ardabil carpet not on a wall in London, but on the floor of the shrine in Ardabil, with pilgrims kneeling on it in prayer, the light from oil lamps glinting off its silk highlights. Picture a Qashqai rug, not in a collector's climate-controlled home, but on the earthen floor of a smoky tent, with children playing on it, food being served on it, its vibrant colors a defiant roar against the monochrome landscape outside. These objects were meant to be lived on, to be part of the messy, beautiful fabric of human life. Their wear and tear, the subtle fading, the occasional stain, these are not just damages. They are the patina of experience, the scars of a life. Fully lived, a mainstream historical fact that's easy to overlook in our digital age, is the sheer staying power of this technology. A well-made hand-knotted carpet is one of the most durable objects a human can create. There are carpets still in use today that are 300 or 400 years old. They have outlasted the empires that created them, the palaces they once furnished, and generations of the families who owned them. They are quiet, patient survivors. They have absorbed the sounds of laughter, of arguments, of prayers, of lullabies. They have felt the tread of countless feet, from kings and queens to servants and children. If they could speak, the stories they would tell would be more intimate and revealing than any official history. For one last quirky tidbit, think about the idea of rug rage, but in reverse. There's a concept in some Persian traditions of a carpet's spirit or temperament. A rug with a chaotic, jarring design or clashing colors was believed to create a sense of unease in a room. Conversely, a carpet with a harmonious, balanced design was thought to bring peace and tranquility. To the home, the carpet was not just a passive object. It was an active agent that could influence the emotional atmosphere of a space. It was a kind of primitive feng shui, an intuitive understanding that our visual environment has a profound effect on our psychological well-being. As we stand here now, looking at this woven world, it's clear that the story is not just about wool and silk or patterns and knots. It's about the enduring human need to create order and beauty in a chaotic world. It's about the desire to connect with something larger than ourselves, whether it's God, nature, or the deep river of our own history. Historians will always argue about the precise meaning of this symbol or the origin of that technique. But the ultimate story of the Persian carpet is not one that can be fully captured in words. It is a story that is felt. It's in the softness of the pile under your feet, the depth of the indigo blue that pulls you in, the endless, hypnotic repetition of a border that seems to contain all of time. Each thread is a word, each knot a sentence, each carpet a library of silent, beautiful knowledge, waiting for a patient eye to read it. And so, as the light fades on our journey through these woven worlds, the vibrant colors soften into the deep, restful hues of twilight. The intricate details of the medallions and the mythic beasts begin to blur, their sharp edges giving way to the gentle contours of memory, their once loud stories fading into a soft, melodic hum that resonates deep within your mind. The rhythmic thwack of the loom has ceased, the bubbling of the dye pots has gone quiet, and the only sound that remains is the whisper of ancient threads settling into a peaceful, dignified silence. These objects, so full of life and history, now rest, their purpose fulfilled. Having shared their sacred and secular secrets with you, you can feel the weight of the centuries they carry, not as a burden, but as a comforting, grounding presence. Each carpet, a universe unto itself, now slowly closes its gates, the guardian borders ensuring a serene and protected stillness within. The paradise gardens are now bathed in moonlight, the cypress trees standing as dark, silent sentinels against a sky of deepest indigo. The chaotic energy of the hunt has stilled, the noble hunters and their fantastic prey frozen in a timeless, elegant tableau under the quiet gaze of the stars. Let the complexity of the patterns dissolve, leaving behind only the simple, profound feeling of softness, of warmth, of an enduring beauty that has weathered the ages and now offers you its tranquility. Let your own thoughts slow, your breath deepen, finding the same steady, patient rhythm of the weaver's hand, a cadence that has created so much beauty from such simple, humble beginnings. Allow this gentle, silent artistry to guide you now into the soft and seamless tapestry of your own dreams.